turns up, I don't know, but we've had some. Apologies, we'll deal with them as we go through. So, official apologies. None. Yeah, so we've got a substitute from Councillor Matt Price for Vanessa. Member, Gary's member. Okay, thank you. Minutes. To confirm as a true record the minutes. Don't know, you were here, right? Certainly. Good, you and me. Yeah, you're happy with those. I've had a flip through. I'm reasonably happy with them. We accept those? Happy to accept those. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No, there've been no declarations of interest. Public question time. Got lots of public questions. There are none. Well, it is. Why are the public not interested in our harbours, eh, Louise? They turn up for scrutiny and full council. Nobody comes to our harbour committee, and it's really interesting. Yeah. I'll remind you again later, but I have asked to remind us. I'll circulate this. It will get circulated, but there is a harbour site visit, and it's been scheduled for Thursday, the 20th of April at 12 noon. And could we meet at the Newport Harbour office? We'll circulate that for those that are not here, but I think it was a question of the most people that could make it. Became extraordinarily difficult. We tried to do this from January, one way or another, but if you can make it, be good to see you. If you can't, it's perfectly well understood. And we'll circulate that. So item 5 is sometime last year, one of the committee members asked if Southern Water could come along and explain some of the discharges that were occurring or have occurred. And so we're joined today by Keith. Thank you, Keith, and Neil from Southern Water. And I'll hand it over to you. Anything you want to say, Alex? No. Hand it over to you to take it from here. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me and see my screen? All right. Is that better? Love it. I'll project as well. Thank you for having us. Everyone's becoming a bit of an expert in wastewater, which is a good thing. It's great that people care about it. Newport is served by a combined system, and what that means is that the foul water from toilet sinks and dishwashers ends up in the same pipe as stormwater from roads, roofs, impermeable areas. The problem with that is that when we get heavy rainfall, that all mixes in one pipe. That one pipe can't cope, and the stormwater is released to the environment. And the public have made it absolutely clear that that practice is no longer acceptable. We're in agreement with that, and we're working with everyone to reduce the number of discharges. However, I would say that those discharges are there to protect homes, businesses from flooding. So for the short term, maybe even the medium term, they will be a necessary part of the drainage system, albeit with everyone taking steps to slowly reduce the reliance on them. If it was a foul-only system, water companies could guarantee there would be no releases. We have old towns, old cities, and it's probably worth saying that the whole world, all the main cities in the world are coping with this, and we live in a place with the highest levels of transparency. So take Scotland, for instance, only 25% of their combined sewer overflow estate is alarmed. We're at 100%. And what's more, we share almost all of our data with everyone completely transparent. So this isn't a case of us being the dirty people of the world or Europe. That's not the case. We've got the highest levels of transparency, and every world city has a combined system, and they have combined sewer overflows, but we're kind of world leaders in the transparency surrounding that. So there's a little bit of background, but we're also at the stage where we know largely what we want to do about it, and we're in a place where we can project some of the benefits of that. So the Isle of Wight, as you may know, is a pathfinder area where we're prioritising the reduction in storm overflows, and we've got a 5-step process. And what I'll try and do is link that to Newport and the surrounding area so we can all relate to it. So the first part of the process is optimization. How do we get the most out of our sites? So this is fairly, this is where all the sewage, stormwater from Newport and the surrounding areas ends up. It's just off Fairley Road next to the Medina, and it used to be a sewage works. So you can see this green area here. That's an old part of the sewage works, and that is 14,000 meter cubes in there that's currently not being used. So prior to the summer, we're going to pump any excess flow into those redundant storage tanks to act as a big tank to detain the flow. So for a site that spills 90 to 100 times a year, we think we can get that down to below 30 just by bringing those tanks online. That's what we can do at our sites. What water companies could do at their sites, probably, depending on the intervention, make a big dent on it, but it won't solve everything. It won't, because some of these sites aren't beaten by a little bit. Sometimes 10 times the flow is coming in during the storm. So a significant gap between what the station can do and what we're asking it to do during a big summer storm. 10 times the flow. So whilst we need to be doing what we can do on our sites, in most cases, it won't stop discharges. We need to start looking in the catchment to take the water out before it gets there. So that's fairly in the improvements we want to make. And optimization, all sites need to be pumping and storing as much as they possibly can. The next step is misconnections. So we've got 120 examples of where new developments have been built. They've separated out the stormwater, but they connect it back in anyway. So the one in the top right is Lower Church Road in Gurnard. So that's 3.5 hectares of stormwater that's just been connected into the foul, and that's 300 meters from a watercourse. So this is water that doesn't need treating. This is water from roads and roofs, and our desire is to disconnect that and put that into the watercourse. So such is the extent of the flow that we're actually going to have to apply for a flood risk permit from the Environment Agency. But currently that is going into the foul system, overwhelming it and causing the downstream sites to discharge. So 120 of these in the Isle of Wight, and we think it make a big difference if we take these out, but also work with the local authority to stop this kind of thing happening. So stop new developments connecting stormwater into the foul sewer, because one house with its roof drainage connected is worth 400 houses with just the foul connected. So new developments, the foul flow makes very little difference whatsoever, but the stormwater from the roads and the roofs makes a huge difference.
Will you just say that again? I like those sort of things. 400 houses, what? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but 400 houses is equal to what?
So one house with its roof water connected in is worth 400 houses of just the foul alone. So, you know, another case study here is on the next one, really. So we know where all the large roofs are. Our large roofs contribute a huge amount of flow into the foul sewer. So here you can see the teams installing planters on Gurnard Community Centre and then Buckler's View. So Buckler's View is a care home in Gurnard, and it has a roof area of 800 meters squared. So at 5 millimeters of rainfall, you'll get 4 to 5 tons of water hitting the sewer instantly. Now, all of the downpipes are now served by planters. So not only is that flow attenuated and captured, but now the community of the care home have now each been assigned a planter each to plant and have something attractive. So, you know, we kind of want to see rainwater as a resource rather than a burden to get rid of. So we know where all the red roofs are on the Isle of Wight, red roofs being roofs of more than 300 meters squared, which are problematic, and we know where they're connected. So bit by bit, we're slowly speaking to landowners, to property owners, to disconnect and manage their stormwater for them. The next step is highway schemes. So we know which roads are problematic in terms of runoff 30% of the flow in our sewer comes from roads, and we want to work with the local authority to install rain gardens, roadside swales, tree pits, permeable paving, and things that are just going to slow the flow from the public highway. So you may know that there's two HAS schemes, so Action Heritage Zones in Newport and Ryde. And the model that we want to do is work with the local authority to effectively fund the difference between sustainable drainage and what the local authority was going to deliver as part of these schemes. So anytime there's a placemaking scheme or a public realm scheme, we want to contribute financially to that scheme to install drainage features, such as the ones you can see on my screen. So we're currently just working out the details with Island Roads and the Isle of Wight Council about how we can implement these schemes. And the public will be left with greener, open areas, nicer town centres, and we will be effectively managing impermeable area, because generally town centres are old. There's concrete and impermeable area everywhere. And when it rains, that water's got to go somewhere and it goes into our system. If we can slow that down through nature-based solutions, we can stop the flow there. So here's an example of what Newport Town Centre would look like according to some of the early plans. And you can see rain gardens, permeable paving there. We've got some of those art drawings as well, which I didn't manage to get in this slide in time. And then finally, you've probably heard a lot about water butts, and they can be belittled. But when you can't manage stormwater any other way, you put a 200-litre water butt on every single property, and very quickly those numbers add up into something that is quite remarkable. And the example that I will give is Haven Street, where for a population of about 200 properties, we managed to give 72% of people a water butt, and we cut spills from Haven Street pumping station by 70% just by doing something as simple as giving everyone a water butt. So there's a kind of step-by-step process of what we plan to do with regards to reducing storm overflows. There's the other part of what we're doing as well, is increasing the understanding of water quality. Before I go into the details, water companies are not the only people involved in water quality: houseboats, dogs, farmers, general runoff and pollution. However, we are important players to that. So you will see we've got a beach boy system that largely gives a binary outcome that says there has or there hasn't been a discharge. The problem with that is bacteriological sampling takes time. So it needs someone to go out and take the sample, it needs to go to a laboratory, it needs to be grown overnight, and that process can take 48 hours. So answering that question, is it safe to go in the water, is a difficult one to answer. A, because of all the other contributing factors, but also B, because of the lag time. So what we're trialing is real-time water quality monitoring buoys. So buoys that sit in the water that monitor the quality real time, you can dial up. That's a novel technology. It's not something that's been proven. However, we've got 2 on trial. If they're successful, you will see them in a lot of places. And also, we are exploiting citizen science. So we're working with UKSA and the Wild Heart Trust on the Isle of Wight, and we've given mobile water quality monitoring tests, where you go out and take a sample, you have a mobile kit, and it will tell you within an hour or so whether or not bacteriological count is high or sufficient according to the bathing water standards. So there's a kind of overview of the program and specifically what we're doing to reduce storm overflows. I think I'll finish it by saying it's everyone's problem, but it's no one's fault. And in order to tackle them, water companies are really key, but overall we have very little control as to the land use. So we need people to manage their stormwater and be the catalyst to help people manage their stormwater with them. Any questions on that?
Thanks for that, Keith. Right.
Pardon my ignorance on this subject. The only thing that comes to mind when he was going through that nice presentation there, we have hose bans during the course of the year, which seems to become more regular. By doing what you're doing, are you restricting the amount of rainwater that's going into the system eventually that we rely on? Because you are diverting what is our resources to somewhere else, are you? I got that wrong.
No, if you look at the way that most groundwater recharges, it recharges slowly over time. and most of our drainage systems are now impermeable. Everyone's got their drive block paved, there's car parks, there's roads everywhere. That water races out through our sewer, out to sea as quickly as possible. So if anything, we're improving the resilience of the water resource situation because we're allowing water to slowly percolate down into the ground where the majority of our aquifers are for drinking water. And also, if we're equipping the entire population with water butts and planters, we are giving people the opportunity to save water and be more water efficient in their homes.
Vanessa.
You made the Times this morning. There's an article about Haven Street and the water butts and what Southern Water have done on the Isle of Wight as a trial. So my first question would be, how are you going to roll those water butts out? And could I say that going back quite a long time, probably, I don't know, 18, 19 years ago, the council or Southern Water, I'm not sure which, offered free water butts to every household on the island. Mine's still working, I'm pleased to say. So that's one thing, you know, will you be doing that? Because having read the little article, it was quite fascinating. Secondly, we all use too much water. Why aren't you running a campaign asking people to cut down on water consumption in the same way we've all had to reduce electricity? We've had to because it isn't there. People are saying the Third World War will probably be fought over water. So, you know, why don't we get on board with that? Haven Street used to be in my ward, and I can remember on a really bad storm, the sewage used to run down the high street. So that's great to hear that's got better. National Trust. I live on the footpath at Shanklin. You probably know about the house where the footpath has collided. The National Trust do nothing about clearing out any of their watercourses. And I still say part of the problem on Shanklin footpath was because they haven't cleared I mean, you've only got to go up the fields and you can see it tangled, overgrown, tree stumps, which means the water isn't draining away correctly. Is there any pressure you can bring to bear on the National Trust? Because there are probably certain roads where if they cleared the riverbeds, it would stop those roads flooding. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think there was 3 questions there, Quay.
Yeah, you'll have to remind me. So the first one about Haven Street.
Roll out the barrels.
Yeah.
Are we
So
rolling out the barrel, Quay?
we got 72% acceptance in Haven Street, which was great. We're rolling out at Gurnard, and the challenge is, can we replicate that in a bigger urban area? We've got 50% in Gurnard. 25% of people aren't in. So we've got to devise a way of that. We've got to find a way. Most people haven't got room. So if you think about terraced houses, we've got to get a solution for that. So in answer to your question, yes, we are slowly working our way across the island, but learning as we go because we've never done stuff like this. The second question is, we do have campaigns about water efficiency. If you phone up Southern Water, you'll get a free water efficiency visit, and someone will visit your house and give you ideas and tips on how you can save money on your bill and save water. So things like different shower heads, shower timers, the hippo bags that go in the cistern of your toilet, and water butts as well. So we do offer that service. And the final one, with regards to the landslip at Luckham, what you raised is just an example of how complicated drainage can be. So while we're trying to resolve storm overflows, we're trying to resolve flooding as well. And involved in that mix is the Environment Agency, landowners, the council, Island Roads, and the water companies. So trying to get all those people to do what's right it can be quite challenging, and that's what we're finding. So if we want to reduce storm overflows, the first thing that we're going to have to do is work with other people, especially people who own lots of land and own large impermeable areas. So, you know, the National Trust being a key one in that.
Gary, come be right after.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Really interesting, fascinating. You mentioned at the top of the presentation timescales, short to medium term, about getting rid of overflows and all that kind of stuff. What is short and medium term?
So, I mean, I'll probably have to go into regulation to answer this question. So the Environment Agency and DEFRA and Ofwat have got together and effectively put a limit on 10 overflows per year to be delivered before 2030. And a lot of that comes into in 2025, but we've said, well, we want to crack on with that. We want to go faster. So we've applied for Ofwat to release early funding because water companies are regulated in 5-year cycles. So doing something out there in the middle of one of those cycles generally doesn't happen. But it's probably one of the biggest crises that the water companies have faced, the whole interest in sewage over the past few years. So you know, we want to be at the leading edge of that. So we've applied for early funding to get a lot of this stuff done. Because we don't want to be flat-footed, but the regulatory targets come in 2030. But we've also said to the regulators, we'd love to start on this. How do you want us to prioritise? And they've come back saying shellfish, bathing waters, and rivers. So the entire Solent, so the entire north coast of the Isle of Wight is a shellfish area, the Solent. So it's gone right to the top of the national list. So the Isle of Wight's done very well in terms of the prioritisation of how we're going to tackle storm overflows.
Ray.
One last question. How many storm overflows is in the Medina and Slime Rail? Something. Sorry?
6 that go into the harbour area. The vast majority of those are monitored, and it's stormwater. So 95% of what goes in, rainwater. The other 5% will be road sill. You can go the whole route to Sanderhound pumping station down the cycle path. You can just see the runoff from agriculture is all the brown discoloration, you know, and the immediate thought is effluent. And it's just soil runoff off from the roads. If the road gullies aren't cleaned out by island, then that's what. And it just looks bad. But I know speaking to people who work in the harbour, evidence of human effluent going into the harbour. It is generally my normal job is dealing with misconnections who build homes and put it into surface water drainage. So you'll get toilets getting flushed into surface water drainage, which ends up. All we try and do is recycle that water into the environment all the time. We want to keep the water not in the sea. So I've spent a lot of time tracing up streams and find where stuff has come from. Dishwashers, people's washing machines, had a new utility room. And they just drop it straight out the back into where the guttering. I think that's right to environment. So, there's lots of different things that people can do to make the capacity of the sewer much greater. Food service establishments putting fat, oil, and grease straight down the drain. So you've all heard of fatbergs. Everybody thinks a public sewer you can do like the Korean 350 millimeters. It doesn't take much from an Indian restaurant pushing on ghee fat down his drain for that to go cold, go hard, off the whole. Yeah.
So we're not singling out any
So
establishment.
it's quite common. It is quite a common thing, and it's a massive problem within the industry. So it's another strand of what we do, and it's all about trying to increase the capacity of the network. So everybody has a part to play in that. I was watching a wonderful thing about wild river swimmers the other day, and the nice lady with a bobble said, "Well, this morning I've seen sanitary towels, I've seen wipes and condoms. Don't flush them down the toilet. Flush them down the toilet. There is a likelihood that they can have a big
just to close off that question, then you'll know that we've got a real time app that tells you whether or not there has or hasn't been a discharge called Beach Boy, and that'll tell you real time what's happening. We're going to expand that to our entire estate this financial year. So this financial year, not just the ones that affect bathing water will be on, the whole estate will be live real time. And you'll be able to see, I mean, if we publish all of our releases annually. So if you go onto our website, you'll be able to see all of our releases on there, irrespective of bathing water. But at the moment, Beach Boy is just bathing water.
Just extended that, haven't they, to sewer level monitors. So there's 23,000 sewer level monitors have just gone in, which gives them early notification of a problem. So before we were having to be reactive about what we were doing, and it was flooding into people's gardens, we were going clearing it out. Now when it gets to 30% capacity, it's alerting us. We're sending a crew out who are jetting it, and it prevents it from happening. So 23,000 alarms have been put in so far, and that's fairly recent. That's in the last. So I'm going to increase them and then increase them. So it just gives us the heads up so we can get on the front foot, and all this work prevents those discharges.
Back to my original question, how many of the discharges in Medina and Wales still not? Because they're all, because I remember sitting on Cowes Harbour Commission.
Harbour are all regulated. They're all have to go through the EA. So they go through the flow meter. Everything has to go through the EA. And I think I've got figures which are available on the website for the last 12 months, or for 2022. Every single discharge was approved by the EA because it was in storm conditions. The only thing that showed to be a little bit of a blip was Newport Quay in October, and that's when the rising mains got to sea close. So there was a 2-day period where there was spills. It was just one of those things. Nobody knew the pipe was going to split, and that has to go through the EA as well. We have to notify them that category spill, and that was dealt with. And I mean, I think the ramifications went on for a few days, but the actual spill was stopped.
And last question. And do you monitor Island Harbour as well as part of this conference going on down in Medina? That's a privately.
No, we only operate assets that are owned by Southern Water, and
Right.
as Neil says, all of the discharges that are permitted by the Environment Agency, and if we operate outside those permits, there's a strong likelihood we've broken the law, and if and when that does happen, we're fined, prosecuted, etc. So every discharge has to be, and the consents and permits are quite big, thick legal documents, state exactly when we can and can't. And contrary to public opinion, they are enforced, heavily enforced, regulated.
Right, Vanessa.
Yes, a couple of quick questions. Penny feathers at Ryde, nearly 900 houses. I sat at planning and they're talking about attenuation ponds, and the last phrase was Monkton Brook. Hang on a minute. You know, from Southern Water's point of view, when I say storm drains, I would have thought that now we're into an era, almost like the Spanish, where the drains should be a damn sight bigger than they actually are. So, that's it. And secondly, aquifers. Do we know where the aquifers are on the Isle of Wight? And then is there any chance that one can drain the water down into them that's falling? Thank you.
Yes, so I don't want to turn this into a planning meeting, but I sound like a broken record for saying that water companies are not statutory consultees in the planning process, and there is an automatic right to connection, which means we cannot stop people connecting in to the sewers. So we're obviously lobbying for change in that. There's going to be an amendment to the Flood and Drainage Act to state that new developments have a statutory responsibility to have sustainable drainage. So all those things that I showed you about rain gardens, swales, balancing ponds, etc., there's going to be an obligation on developers to incorporate that into new developments, which we welcome. We are a statutory consultee in the island planning strategy, and our response to that was fairly robust in the sense that all new stormwater connections to the sewer should stop. And to be honest, that's happened already. A lot of the developments that you see put in, there is only a foul-only connection, and as I covered earlier, that's negligible in terms of flow. So it's so important that we work with the planners and the planning authority to get the best outcomes so we don't impact. The aquifers, yes, we know we have level monitors in all our aquifers of where they are. Again, that's something that's very, very strictly regulated and licensed by the Environment Agency. And over the past few years, we've renegotiated the permits with the Environment Agency to abstract because there are two chalk streams on the Isle of Wight, Lookley Brook and the Calbourne. Both are affected by our activities. And chalk streams are a protected environment in the sense that there's only about 100 or so of them in the world. Most of them are in South England. So we renegotiated our license from Testwood, which abstracts from the River Test and some Island, to take account for that because it is a finite source.
Further questions? Thanks, Keith and Neil. I've made a couple of notes. Just so I may have misunderstood, but the Fairley Works, when you're planning to, is that a commissioning or is it you just use it's something that capacity that you use? When's that going to happen? Is that
we want that up and running before the bathing water season, which starts in May. So over the next month or so, we will create an additional 14,000 meter cubed of storage at Fairley, which we think will get spills from 80 to 90 down to 30. So kind of more along the lines of exceptional rainfall.
You mentioned 10 overflows if that comes into legislation, but what will that mean? 10 overflows per overflow pipe or for an area? But what's that mean exactly?
10 overflows per outfall per year. Yeah.
And just for information, surface water or foul, what's the highest depositor of water you mentioned?
Depends whether it's raining or not. I mean, if it rains, surface water tenfold. So on a dry day, 300 litres per second will be coming into Sandown Wastewater Works. On a wet day, 3,000. So an order of magnitude change when it rains, not just a little bit, a huge amount. So not only does that water overwhelm the system, it reduces the quality of the effluent and treatment because you need calorific value to treat wastewater. And if you're feeding it stormwater, you're starving the bugs to do the treatment.
If there's too much water in there, the treatment works don't work. It just can't cope with that level of. But it's interesting to see how quickly that builds up and how it overtakes the foul sewer line. It's just instant.
I mean, are you confident that your discharges are always at times of high waterfall, high rainfall?
Yeah.
It's all shown by the EA that it is. It's all monitored by the EA, and if it's outside of those parameters, they tell us.
Yeah, and you know the permits operate under the concept of strict liability. So for those non-lawyers, strict liability means whoever's fault it is, it's our fault. So if it's a power cut and we discharge it, you know, we are fined and prosecuted. If someone manages to flush a nappy or a tea towel down the toilet and it wraps around our pump and we spill, it's our fault. So you know that's the way strict liability works, and that's the way these permits work.
Just one final thing. Well, two things actually. You talk about misconnections, and that was interesting to hear that. Is that a planning issue? How is this happening? Why is it happening?
I wouldn't say there's two types of misconnection. There's people who put stormwater into the foul and then foul water into the storm. You know, it's not necessarily a planning issue. I'd say a lot of cases it's people who have some work done on their bathroom. Their builder just connects it into the wrong pipe. It's probably well-meaning, but that water, if it goes into a surface water line, it will run out untreated for days, months, years until someone finds it. So we work with the Environment Agency, with the council to find these things, stop them, and put them right. So you know, we last year we found an estate where about 17 properties in Wroxall, all all the foul water was connected into a surface water line and just went straight out into Wroxall Stream. Put that right, we solved all the problems in Wroxall Stream, which was failing according to the Water Framework Directive.
Our developer services, they will approve connections because we can't say no. So they'll approve the connection on a larger scale. But if we can test the network and say that that network will stand 100 new homes coming into it, and they build 100 new homes. I'm doing one in West Sussex at the moment. They have 600 homes being built on that site, and the connection was for 100. And the developer has walked away from it. So now there's people in the existing homes with internal flooding of effluent, because there's now 600 homes put onto the system that was only designed to take 100. So
that was my question. Why?
And that-
How do we? Because it's also part of the problem. It seems part of the problem of too much water into your system. And here we are building up. I mean, at what point can we condition it in planning? How can we do this so that this isn't happening? I mean, we have to put right what we've got wrong, but for new houses, let's not get it wrong, surely.
So we, our response to the Isle of Wight planning strategy was to suggest an offsetting scheme. So if a large development comes along and creates a load of impermeable area, they're compelled to offset that impermeable area by retrofitting sustainable drainage elsewhere. Now that's a desire from Southern Water, whether or not it's actually feasible and deliverable with local authority. But that's one of the things that we would like to consider, because impermeable areas cause flooding and pollution. And we welcome the new law that's coming into place that makes sustainable drainage mandatory for all new developments. So incorporate sustainable drainage features. And our challenge to local authorities is that you make sure that the new homes are built are the most sustainable in terms of water efficiency, but also drainage. And together we'll deal with the existing housing stock, which is problematic. So, we should only really have to deal with the existing housing stock, not the new stuff going forward, but it should be designed the way it should be.
Just finally, a personal interest, and a couple of officers here but how's the interface with how are you doing that with our highways department? How are you interfacing with us on road water, on surface water for roads?
Well, I think most of the areas affected by flooding have a flood group. So, we attend flood groups with the council's drainage officer, Island Roads, the Environment Agency, and that's probably one of the best ways to tackle flooding and pollution, because locals know where the problems are. They can hold us to account, and they can also prepare emergency plans for areas that are affected by flooding. So that's how we work with them. And I think if I could turn back the clock and start my scheme at the start of the PFI, we could have followed Island Roads around while they resurface the island and we install sustainable drainage behind them. Yeah. So, we just need to kind of get over these are new assets that are going to provide a lot of value in terms of public realm and community and also drainage. It's about how we get over there, who's going to own them, who's going to maintain them. But the delivery model that we're working towards in Kent, and I want to replicate here, is Southern Water funds a lot of these improvements, deliver benefit, and the council delivers them, and they're ultimately adopted. So we kind of want to regreen some of the areas to just reduce the amount of flow, because that's what's causing storm overflows and pollution is permeable area. But it extends just more than the highways, Bill. It's people's driveways as well. If you have a driveway that's more than 25 meters squared, you should really have planning permission for that. And it's how we work with owners, work with enforcement, but also work with the trades for people who are putting these resin driveways or block paved driveways in, because 9 times out of 10, the water runs straight out onto the road, into a gully, into our system. So, that's water that doesn't necessarily need to be treated, but it's finding its way into it.
I'll come to Jonathan. Alex, with another hat on, Sean. I mean, are we confident that our engagement with Southern Water from the Highways Authority perspective is where it should be? I understand that there's an engagement with Island Roads, but are we sufficiently okay with that? Okay. Any further questions? Jonathan.
Sorry, just a very basic one. We get emails for the discharges that you have, and we have it in minutes instead of because it's not pumped and discharged. Is there an average sort of size of these discharge pipes? I'm just curious because if there are hose pipe, it makes a fair bit of difference.
Yeah, there's a real variety. So some combined sewer overflows will just serve a cul-de-sac or a small estate. Some will serve quite fairly most of Newport. So tens of thousands of properties. So there's a real variety in the terms of combined sewer overflow, which, as you rightly say, will likely have a different impact on water quality.
That being all, no further questions. Keith, Neil, thank you for your time you set aside to come along and speak to us today. We are appreciative. We're usually more in number, but all of this is minuted and we'll pass on to the members that are not here. Do appreciate your time, and the information you've given us is helpful. Very
Thank you, and it'd be great to come back and give an update 6 months to a year's time.
We'll take you up on that, definitely. Thank you. You certainly to stay for the rest of this at all, and good to see you. See you again. Okay. We should talk about SUDS on the two HAS games, not now, but there's been some pushback on the SUDS, as you know, Alex and Sean. Item 6 is our finance. Can you carry on, Vanessa? I'm in no rush.
And it has a gap in the middle. So when it rains very hard, if it fills up too much, there's an extra pipe which slowly, like an attenuation tank. Yeah.
Goes out and waters your roses. It's
But,
clever, isn't it?
but I want one.
I rather hope they were going to say that they roll them out right across the island, but it didn't sound like it, did it? Shame, really. Thanks, Vanessa. Finance report for Newport Harbour. That's pages 9 and 10 in your papers. Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jordan. Obviously, this is a standard item on the agenda, and this is much the same pattern for Newport and Ventnor as it was at the previous meeting, which is relatively good news. These are figures at the end of, the figures you've got in your pack are figures at the end of February. So we've only got 1 month more until the end of the financial year. So the forecasts are probably pretty accurate as to where we'll be at the end of the financial year. So in summary, very similar patterns, I think, as we had previously. In terms of Newport, we're looking at a net figure, if you like, a forecasted net figure of £12,000 to the good, nearly £13,000 actually, which I think in terms of looking at a lot of other parts of the council and recovery of COVID, etc., pretty good going. So all credit to Jonathan and his colleagues. We're seeing similar patterns in terms of very positive income increases in terms of the work that's been going on with leases and licensing, which Sean and his colleagues have been working very heavily on and continue to do so. I think we also continue to see, although we are hoping, as I think I said at the last meeting, for some substantial improvements in this area, of a downturn in the forecasted income for the visitors at the Folly. I think we talked about this last time, that I think a lot of that relates to the quality of the hospitality business down there, the pub down there, which has obviously recently been a lot of money pumped into it. So I think Jonathan and his colleagues are hoping for a good summer, and that we hope that next year that we can really turn that figure around, because it is very much influenced by that. It's quite true.
Just a thing. Is Island Harbour, that's not operation, is it?
Made the properties down there. Down there. Fire. Sorry. Yeah, but didn't we be voting to put second homes up by 100% or something? Tax. Yeah, Island Harbour is issue down there. That can be resolved.
As I understand it, they are operating the lock reduced hours because they've still got Richardson's. A lot of the berths are actually owned by the house owners, so they've got to, but they're not pushing it as heavily as they did.
See, it was around. This week, I think. It's too loud.
I don't know the full details, but I know that the locks are showing their age.
Thanks, Ryan.
It's question. Island Harbour management. I haven't heard it ever mentioned, but Newport Council will be interested, you say, in selling it to Newport Council. I think
The statutory duties.
the general, in terms of the harbour, the general view was when we took it on a number of years ago, myself and Sean, in terms of taking it on, it was to get it to a standard where it achieved Port Marine Safety Code compliance and all things that we talked about at the last meeting. Once we'd achieved that, we did say, with administration, we talked about the possibility of looking at alternative operators of that harbour. I think it is probably true to say that we do need to investigate that at some stage, as whether the council wants to continue operating harbours, whether it wants to look at, and it's already outsourced Ryde Harbour and Ventnor Harbour, and it's whether we look at that option, Newport Harbour. Certainly a possibility. Certainly has been discussed in the past. It was something that I think it was a harbour that nobody was interested in because of the state that was in at that time. But obviously we've turned the harbour around now, but there may be more interest. But certainly happy to discuss that with the portfolio lead, and so we might want to go with that, because that's certainly been an aspiration.
Doors open, right? Never say no. We never say no, do we? No, but I mean, we never say no, do we? We're making lots of money in Ryde on the marina. Thanks, Isle of Wight Council. But we're spending lots as well, though. Yeah, and Alex, just a summary is 2533. That's pretty much where we're going to be at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any drastic changes in this last month from the accountant, so I do think that's where we're likely to be. Got me to pick up Ventnor. I mean, Ventnor's, as we've always said, is much more straightforward. It continues to just be, under budget by about forecast of 5,000 in the red, nearly 6,000 in the red. And the same kind of pattern continues. The only thing that's possibly worth pointing out, as you can see from last year's actuals, the issues around the cost of the seaweed removal, because the budget has been increased to reflect those costs. Members will be aware at the last meeting that we have outsourced the harbour. That contract begins on the 1st of April, so we are days away from that. And that's a 5-year contract, so we will obviously have to report this possibly slightly differently in future meetings. But yeah, it's still a statutory report, so we still have an obligation to report it at this meeting. It is a fairly simple and straightforward budget, that.
And with the new management in
It's
place.
going to be very interesting, I think.
Comments, questions? Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that.
So after our Port Marine Safety Code audit that was carried out in September, there was sort of 3 main points that got raised that we could. One of them was updating the website, which Lawrence has kindly done. So that's been updated. Straightforward. It's still part of the council website, but it was easier to find. Then the risks, we've gone through and had a look at some of them, but they will be finished in July. But that's going through all of our risk registers with navigational risk. So we have the original ones. We changed with most things. And then with the marine services, the main one that we had concerns, or David had concerns about, the operation of Blade Runner. That was due to the size and type of vessel, the Blade Runner, as she is the last of the commercial boats that are operating, and when she's loaded with a blade, she's big. So I met with Williams Shipping, witnessed them come in, did berthing operation with them, load them, and then went out with them. So quite straightforward, as we thought they did do it. They do, and it fits within our risk assessment of such a boat.
What was their reaction going past the folly? That seems navigable. And once they're past the folly, discussed that at the last meeting.
So when Blade Runner come in, they have to, of course, go through Cowes, and as they get closer to the folly, the river gets naturally a bit narrower. Cowes' jurisdiction stops at about the Folly Pub, and then Newport starts from the Folly Pub. All of the skippers of Blade Runner have got a pilotage exemption certificate from Cowes. We ask for copies of that. So once they're past the folly, it of course widens up because the nice thing with Blade Runner was that she was designed for what she does, retrofitted. So with the 3 engines she's got, she's probably most of the boats at the folly. So she can hold station, go backwards and forwards, operate. She operates as well going forward or backwards, and where they've got directional props, they've got 3 of them along the length of the boat. They can stop, hold. So they can turn on the spot. So the length of the boat, they can turn around, they can stop themselves dead, they can hold themselves. So they're probably more manoeuvrable than all the yachts that we have down there, although she's 6 times the size of the largest boat we have. But they do come up, they've got very good clearance. When it's busy, they get a guard boat from Cowes to get through. So during Cowes week, they get a bit of help. and also that there's good radio communication coming up during the summer when it's busy. We've got Bolly Ventures that operate our visitors pontoon as well as the water taxi on the same channel, so they know they're coming, so they can encourage people that may not have noticed it, possibly notice it. So it's quite a controlled operation. And then once they go alongside the quay, they've got, I think, 5 besters, and because she's so maneuverable and spin on the spot. And also at times she can come in one way and then leave without turning. Same as the car ferries.
Any further comments, questions? Should we move on to Ventnor Harbour, please?
So with Ventnor Harbours, and that was sort of looked into. One of the main things we had to confirm is the oil response ramifications that we need for a harbour of that size. And we've gone to the MCA, which is sort of one of them, and they have deemed that we don't need to go through all the bells and whistles. We will have an oil response on board, but we don't have to go through the full formal plan. Of course, there will be a plan for if someone spills 20 litres in, they will have absorbent booms and everything. That having big inflatable booms and skimmers and everything else for internally harbour wasn't deemed necessary because of the size of the boats. Because it goes in there as a 12-metre cat, runs petrol engines, so it's not a major concern inside the harbour. Obviously, anything that happens outside the harbour on that side of the island is not going to just affect them, it's going to affect the whole side. So then the sort of tier 3 response, which is all set up, but still run by the harbour council as a whole. Then it's just sort of the website, sort of getting used to getting it planned for the change of management.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any comments, questions? Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to add to what Jonathan said, obviously with the implementation of the 5 management contract on the 1st of April, there is still a requirement harbour to be safety code compliant. And Jonathan has taken the Newport that Ventnor set up factor, go through draft plan Johnson. It will be their plan. They have taken work, modified it, and David Foster, representative, and the contractor have gone through that, and we will work to ensure that safety code compliant.
Thanks, Sean. We're happy with that. Sounds. Thank you. Jonathan, again, isn't it? Your report.
So the quarterly report, which is from the 29th of December to the 12th of March, our numbers are beginning to pick up. Amazingly, in December there was 2 people that wanted to come boating for 2 days. Very kind and fully encouraged, but a bit chilly to say the least. But as you can see in March and for half of March, we had 17. So the season's starting. I wouldn't say that we're beating them off with a stick yet, but they still remember we're here. So the folly is beginning to start up now, but because it's you've got to be quite hardy to tie up in the middle of a river and then row ashore. So their numbers will period. The next sort of thing we've been doing is nicely the no longer loved or abandoned boats that we end up with occasionally. We started clearing them so in February we run notices to try and get the owners to remember they own a boat and contact us. Deadline was that it was in the middle of February, and then we have now gone through adverts saying that we will take possession, which we have now done, and we then did a closed bid auction. The deadline was last Friday. So out of that, 10 of the boats didn't get bids. They didn't see the potential, and 11 of them did. So with a bit of luck, we won't have to break up too many, but it does mean that we'll gain the berths that they were occupying. So hopefully we can get customers that for those berths as well as their money for berths. That's sort of the main thing. Obviously, we've started prepping for the season, which is always the joy of power washing pontoons and prepping everything up. But that's sort of done in-house this year. Main sort of servicing part of that is that some of our poly swing moorings, the ground chain, which is swing moorings are run by a heavy duty chain that's run along the bottom, and then we have lighter chains that go up that we tie boats to. Some of the ground chains and the anchor and the shackles were requiring being changed due to their timescale. We kindly got supplied with some of the floating bridge X chain, which happens to work out brilliantly. So we've got cows to swap 2 sections of our polypond swing moorings. Don't need to worry about quite some time. Obviously, during the cold snap that we had back in September and January, did test some of our water supplies on pontoons, but they were noticed quickly and repaired in-house harbour staff. Sadly, the hand crane, it's been deemed not cost effective to continue with it. So its last lift was on the 8th of February. So at that point, it will now be mothballed. It's just not operationally viable. We will grease it so then it's got potential that it can move, but
Find it, right?
yeah.
Find it.
Obviously, we've been keeping the slipways and everything else clean. Only sort of problems we've had during the winter as well is that in January, 2nd of January, good start of the year, we had a 7-metre boat that sank on its pontoon, on its swing mooring. It was a vessel that we'd been pumping out regularly, trying to encourage the owner out. The design of the vessel made it very difficult to pump dry because it had a very secure front cabin build up, and we could only pump. But that sank. It was recovered, and it's now ashore. So that one's clear. But also during that time, we were having to pump quite regularly after all the major rains. Boats, they've only got limited batteries, so their bilge pumps last till sort of November, December, and then after that, they sometimes need a bit of help. But what we try and do is ring the owners and get them to do that. But if we notice, we pump them before. And we had one boat that nearly went down in, but we managed to pump that out and find the source of
was thinking. Other than that, we've touch wood, it's not been too bad except for the rainwater cold.
Right.
Yeah. One that's not, that you probably heard about, is it's not in this period of the report, but you've probably heard that there was a fire on Friday, which was spotted by Cowes Harbour Commission that were carrying out work, luckily down on that site. Harbour staff were on site very shortly after that. With Cowes' workboats that were already there because they were working, we managed to get a fire crew to the pontoon. They managed to control the fire but not put it out because with glass fibre, as soon as it is alight, it's very difficult to put out. The boat was monitored until it sank. Before it sank, we managed to get chains on it, so it was put in place. And then it's been monitored every day since it sank. It's got absorbent booms around it. There's an amount of diesel still on board that you just see dripping out of the breather valve, so it's not a huge amount. So we've got a large absorbent boom around it. Have been in contact with Cowes and the insurance, and it booked and planned to be airbags and divers, and then it's been taken down to Cowes, lifted. The reason for going to Cowes is they've got the best facilities in a yard that they can lift an area that can be off and then disposed of. We were very lucky with the wind direction. It stopped our pontoon damaged or any of the other boats just blowing straight off the pontoon, and we managed to get chains on it through its lines, so it stayed in place until it sank. When they lift it, they may give you an idea. When we got there, the fire brigade reported about 600 head of boat. The mast actually, so the boom that was across the middle of the boat, got about that much of it, and it's melted. Yeah, so we've lost both masts. Twin masted long keel yacht. Yeah, 9 meters. 9 meters, about 30 foot. Yeah. So it burned down to deck, but it has been secured, and kindly, when Cowes do their daily check of their moorings, going beyond our jurisdiction changed, checked it, and then our staff have been going up as well, checking it. But it's nicely secure. It's been, when it sank, managed to get it to lean away from our pontoon, so it's not damaging our. But damage to us is that some of the where they've got oily, got 1 or 2 hot burn holes, but what it could have been if the wind was going the other way. I mean, it's one of those things. It sounds horrific that it's sunk, but if it sinks, definitely know it's out. And it's sort of the fire service were doing their best to try and put it out without sinking it, but by the end of it, better that, you know, they wanted to stop because they were worried it was sinking. Well, if it sinks, it does deal with that. Better than trying to tow a boat that's small.
Thanks, Jonathan. Comments, questions? Thank you, Jonathan. Any, Alex, Sean? No. Apart from members' question time, which is disposal of Blackhouse Quay, to receive an update. So Who's going to do it? Sean, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was hoped to bring a full report back to Harbour Committee today. However, we had a slight delay in commissioning and then receiving the valuation of both sites. Pleased to say we have now received those. I've been through them. I've now shared them with the tenant. Just commenced discussions and negotiations regarding the content of that valuation, and should be in a position to bring a next Harbour due recommendations. Principal decision freehold on both sites.
Thanks, Sean. Any questions for Vanessa? I don't know if Gary, you were here. It's disposal of a piece of land on which side of the west side of the Medina, to a commercially interested business, which is in a sense of regeneration of that small area. So in principle, we agreed it as a committee, and the detail, Sean and our officers went away for the detail of that valuation of land and negotiations with the commercial company. That's where we are. And as you heard, we'll come back in June hopefully in June, for a further decision. Everything's been going on for years, Vanessa. Been going on for years. So, yes, I don't know. It's a pretty derelict site, isn't it?
The current tenant took an assignment on the lease from the previous occupant about 5 years ago, and they approached us about 18 months to actually take on the freehold. So current tenant, that long, the site has quite an interesting history.
Any comments, any questions on that? Thank you. Thanks for that, Sean. Members' question times. Any questions? Yes, Gary. There being no questions, thank you all. Thank you for your attendance. Do appreciate it. As always, and your input. Some of it was interesting, some more for me anyway, at least. Although I've heard them many times before, I'm probably going to hear them many times again. And thank you to our officers for your time and input this afternoon. Thanks to Louise, as always, to attend. And that's the end of the meeting. And next meeting is, we don't know. We will advise you. Yeah. And depending on, I know you're standing in, Vanessa, but we will confirm this Thursday, 20th April at 12 noon, if you can make it. Walk around the extensive estate, which is Harbour, Newport Harbour. Thanks, Karen. Thank you.